And welcome everybody to episode 182 of Two Goalies, One Mike. Brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from at all 6 Western New York locations, a location in Rochester, and for those of you who want to take the drive, one in Ohio. One of the best spots to get any of your locally crafted brews. I would highly suggest the FYA beer, their mango wheat. It is spectacular. And if you need a fatty beer, make sure you need a beer, make sure you make it a fatty beer. And let them know Two Goalies when Mike sent you. Buffalo Go Apparel, one of the best when it comes to Bills and Sabres attire, with all local designs. Shop local, shop small business in Buffalo. You can find them at Buffalo Go Co. on Instagram and Twitter. You can find Fatty Beer at Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter, fattybeer.com. I am Duane, your host, with my co-host Connor Hurls. Quite an eventful day in Sabres Twitterland. But before we get to that, the thing I want to start off first is obviously we haven't really fully discussed the trade deadline. So want to kind of get right into that before we get into all the drama. First off, how are you doing?
Good. Really good. Got a beer league championship. I guess today's Tuesday, on Thursday night. First one at this arena for me. I've been playing there for, 7-8 years, and I've been on some pretty bad teams. So to finally get to that elusive championship game against a really good team with a bunch of my friends, really stoked. Had a big 7-1 win in the semifinals against a pretty good team. So getting excited for that. And just generally, doing pretty well. Recently moved. And excited for, I guess, the end of the season and also the playoffs, because at the end of the day, while it's disappointing we haven't seen it in a while, personally, as Sabres fans, I love playoff hockey. And I'm as excited for the playoffs as I was for the Four Nations tournament, because it's going to be. What's that?
Your background's blurred. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you can do that on your phone. I didn't know that. I'm using my phone at the moment, and I've never seen it on what's it called? I've never seen it on the laptop, but you can do it on your phone, which is pretty cool. The reason I did it is I literally moved in a week ago, and there's still a lot of stuff around. So
no, actually doesn't look bad from my end. It looks good. So I'm very. I should probably know that stuff. Seeing as I host and kind of like produce the show, is news to me. But so Buffalo NHL Trade Deadline is come and gone this past Friday. Sabres did make some moves. We weren't really sure what to expect from them in terms of, we were kind of made to believe it might be a quiet deadline, but it wasn't. They finally shipped out Henri Jokiharju. I personally thought they might get like a third, or even, if a team was desperate enough, like a second. Maybe that's wishful thinking when it comes to him. But I always felt like right-handed defenseman at the deadline could kind of go for a little bit more than, say, a left-handed defenseman. But, he finally shipped him out for a fourth to Boston. Ube Kubel, which I didn't realize, was, a possibility of getting traded. We bring him for Eric Brandstrom. And then, of course, the big trade, Dylan Cousins, Denny Gilbert, and a second-round pick for center Josh Norris and defenseman Bernard Docker. Bernard Docker, yeah.
JBD.
Defenseman. Yeah, right-handed, yeah, which is a big deal.
Well, I call him JBD.
JBD. Okay, yeah, JBD. There we go. For short. Love it. Your thoughts just on overall the deadline and just that day in general? Obviously, you saw a lot of movement. We had Nick Fatty on. Obviously, last episode, you saw Mikko Rantanen get moved for a second time in 6 months to Dallas, which kind of makes them a powerhouse. It seems like the West is the powerhouse right now. Everybody's kind of trying to it was almost like an arms race, right? So I don't know if Edmonton is able to pull off again what they did last year, but it's kind of starting to look like the West might run through Dallas.
Yeah, West is obviously very good. I would say not bigger. The Cousins deal is obviously the biggest, but as impactful towards the future of this Sabres team was re-signing Jason Zucker and Jordan Greenway, which I don't think a lot of people necessarily even expected to happen. I think that it had to be the right deal in each case, given the term and also the money involved. And especially in Jason Zucker's case, given he turns 33 soon, he already made a good amount to come to the Sabres initially, more than I think people wanted the Sabres to pay him. But at this point, the Sabres paying anybody any amount of money, especially in the free agent market, is a positive. But with his production and his experience, his veteran leadership, everything he brings to the team, I think a lot of people did want to keep him around if the right deal was given. And 2 years, given his age, I think is really good. And also for $4.75 million per year, which is less than what he's currently making now. I think that's a good projection for him. And also it brings back a guy that's necessary for this young group moving forward. So I think that was a positive, depending on what the returns were going to be. I think that was really good. And same thing with Jordan Greenway. A lot of people talked about it was a bit of an overpay, but when he's been healthy, he serves a role. He's a very quality bottom six forward, plays with physicality, very good on the PK. Another guy that seems to be beloved in the room, and a guy from Kent, New York, that seems like he actually wants to play in Buffalo, which for both of these guys who have spent their fair share of time in the league, also in winning organizations, to bring both of them back on reasonable 2-year deals, because the expectation, as they keep saying it every year, the expectation next season is going to make the playoffs. Hopefully they'll do something this summer to actually make that more likely. But starting off the deadline with those two moves before any of the flurry of the other moves even happened, I thought was a really, really big positive for this franchise moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Again, it's, me, like, heading into deadline, I was very adamant if they didn't have him signed by deadline day that you had to trade him. And then the reports came out that they were, contract talks were intensifying and they finally got it done. Hey, listen, I'm more than happy to have Jason Zucker still part of this organization. I'm happy that he wants to be here. I think it would have been a black eye a little bit on the organization if a guy like Zucker, who, I'm not sure how, I'm sure there were teams that wanted him other than Buffalo when he did sign, but, he chose Buffalo probably for money, for 1 year for money, hoping to look for, to perform, in a top six role in Buffalo. And hopefully when, come free agency, maybe looking to cash in on having, a good year. But I was so surprised he signed for only 4.75. I thought for sure he'd want more, like probably around like 6, given the season he's had. And the role, to your point, the leadership role he would be playing. But regardless, I think that was a great deal by Kevin Adams, locking him up for 2 years at 4.75 per. And then, like you said, Jordan Greenway, like a guy who wants to be here, plays a specific role. No matter what you think about Jordan Greenway, it might not always show up on the score sheet, as a guy who goes out there and scores goals or is a playmaker. Yeah, sure, he's not that guy, but he serves a big role on this team. He's a fantastic penalty killer. He has a physical presence on the ice. He goes to the net. He protects the front of his own net if he happens to be on the ice. It's an important role that not a lot of guys currently on this roster play, or at least take pride in. And I'm more than happy to have Jordan Greenway back. We'll start things off with obviously the two lesser trades. We'll go right in with Ube Kubel for Eric Brandstrom. I like the deal only because Brandstrom, I think, was a first round pick in, was it 2017 or 2018? Obviously, you're kind of, you're trading a guy who didn't work out in your bottom six role here in Buffalo. You waived him, you sent him to Rochester, was there for a couple of weeks, and then you flip him for a guy who maybe he finds his way starting in Rochester. I think, it's a massive upgrade for the AHL team in Rochester. I think especially coming into a playoff run, I think he's going to serve a huge role on that team and helping those guys win. And on top of that, like maybe he finds his game a little bit and turns into a bottom, pair defenseman for Buffalo down the line. Who knows? We'll see how things kind of turn out for him heading into next year, and again, how he performs here in Rochester going into the stretch of games that, will hopefully lead to a Calder Cup.
Yeah, I think this is nothing more than a boost to Rochester. I personally don't think that, given the type of defenseman he is, he's a smaller, shifty, offensively minded defenseman. I think everybody knows at this point, depending on how much you've followed the Sabres defensive corps over the past 7-8 years, that we've had a lot of that. and especially left-handed shot, guy who isn't necessarily the most physical, but in the right role, in the right situation, he can produce a lot of offense from the back end. And I think he had 14 points in 16 AHL games in different organizations over the past couple of years. Like, he definitely can contribute to them going for a Calder Cup, which, along with Devin Levi, along with Isaac Rosian, I know they even opened up the possibility of Yuri Kulik going down there, and him even potentially being like a hired gun type situation to come in and help them if they need it. I think that's a source of pride, not only for those guys, of course, but for the organization, right? Like, as much as you can talk about your prospect pool, you can talk about everything else. Like, it not only sells tickets in the Rochester area, but it makes guys at that level want to join the organization. And drafting and developing is important, no matter how many times we've technically failed at it. So having a successful team in Rochester does, I know it doesn't seem like it, but it does promote good organizational culture. So hopefully he contributes, and that'd be great. On the Yoki Haru end, I mean, it seemed like his time had run out in Buffalo, and I think that was pretty apparent for a long time. If you can get anything for him, I think that was good. Obviously, he's a third pairing guy. He didn't necessarily make that much of an impact, but he also wasn't an absolute liability either. When you look back at the trade in July of 2019, 1-for-1 for Alex Nylander, a guy that they had drafted in the top 10, and Yoki Haru also was a first-round pick himself. I think the Sabres probably won that trade, given that Alex Nylander didn't really pan out. He had a cup of hot coffee with the Blue Jackets. I think that was last year, actually.
Yeah.
But he never turned into William Nylander, that's for sure. So
no way.
When you look back on that, it was probably a good flyer. I think he played some meaningful games for the team, and by all accounts, he was a pretty good teammate. Yeah. So he did his service. He's going to an organization that's now rebuilding, and I think he's actually going to get a shot to play there, which is good for him because he's still relatively young. And like you said, right-handed defensemen, especially who are relatively responsible at the NHL level in front of their own net, and good at moving pucks and getting them out of their zone. Like, I think he could find a place there, which would be really good for him. Fourth round pick, not going to do much. But if you package that with something else at the draft or in the offseason, having an asset's having an asset. And I think that's productive. So I'm happy they were able to do something.
Yeah. Going back to the Brandstrom deal, I did pull up his numbers here. Just this season in Vancouver, again, he played 28 games in Vancouver this year, which Vancouver in itself has kind of been a shit show. He had in 28 games, again, for a guy that, the expectation for him was 3 goals, 8 points, 17 penalty minutes, and he's a -4, which I'm not going to lie, like those, for a bottom pair guy, I mean, those aren't terrible numbers, especially for a team.
He's always been able to produce offensively. Like, I remember when he was coming up as like a top prospect. Like, that's his thing.
And then here in the AHL between Abbotsford and Hartford, in the 14 games played, he has 3 goals and 13 assists, it looks like, right? Yeah, 3 goals, 13 assists, and then, a plus 4 or 13, sorry. So decent great numbers in the AHL. You got a guy who, to your point, I think will really help a lot in Rochester, maybe especially on the power play. I'm not sure where they'll slot him in. Again, to your point, great offensive upside. It just depends if you can find a role for him to click in. Players that he'll have chemistry with. So again, we'll see. Yoki Haru, we've been talking about him possibly getting dealt since last year. I know we had Matthew Fairburn on before the season. Was it before this season, this year or last year?
It was before last season, I think.
Yeah. And we talked about him being a guy that, might be able to figure it out and might be, perform as a surprise. Just really was never able to figure it out, was never lived up to the hype that we had from him that first season where he just played so well. And then Alex Nylander trade. Unfortunately, it's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But, he goes to a team like Boston, who I think they're not going to make the playoffs this year, I don't think. maybe if they go on a run here, I don't know. We traded like Brad Marchand and Coyle. Like, I think they've kind of given up on the season and are looking to next year already. But yeah, so, he's gone. That kind of leaves, as you said, JBD, Jacob Bernard-Docker will fill that role. I would expect here tomorrow night if he's at immigration. I'm not sure if they report if he's got his immigration stuff figured out. I would assume that he'd be in the lineup. I think he's wearing number 24 too. For all you Cousins guys looking to get your jerseys repurposed, there you go. But yeah, I'm excited to see how he works out. With the Sabres. Who they pair him with. Who. I don't know. I didn't know much about him. I really didn't. So kind of whenever a new player comes in the organization, you're always interested to see how they play, especially when you don't know much about them. But yeah, so definitely excited to see him. But let's get to that trade, specifically the Josh, Cousins and Gilbert first in a second for Josh Norris, who finally found some chemistry last night with Tage Thompson. And then, of course, like I said, Jacob Bernard-Docker. Your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on Norris from what we've seen so far over 2 games played? I don't really think you can judge him much on that first game. You're coming in, emotions are high or low, or I'm not sure how he was feeling. But plus, some players were sick. I'm sure some players were playing sick. So hard to judge his performance on that first game. But the second game, he looked fantastic.
Yeah, so like you said with JBD, like we'll wait and see. Like I think he's being billed as a depth guy that potentially has the ability, because he is still young, to get to that third or second pair. Like I think the ceiling for him would be Owen Power's partner on the second pair, and then the floor would be depth or potentially even an NHL guy. So I think that's a piece that they threw in, but at the same time, as much as we like Dennis Gilbert and the physicality he played with and his game just generally, obviously being a Buffalo guy, I think a guy like JBD has a little bit more pedigree and skill than Dennis Gilbert did. And that's why a second round pick was coming over from the Sabres side, right? Like I think JBD was a former first round pick. And if not, he was a pretty high draft pick, and he does have some pedigree to him. So I do think that's at least why there was a little bit more lopsided on the Sabres side. A lot of people are saying that was a little bit too rich, but when you have as many draft picks as the Sabres do, and you have as many draft picks that haven't panned out as the Sabres have, throwing in a second round pick to get the deal done is not the worst thing that you can do. In regards to Norris for Cousins, it is strictly a reclamation project and a change of scenery trade on both sides. I think each guy has had a variety of different issues, which made it didn't work out in each of their situations. Obviously, we can start with Cousins. I think we all knew from the moment, whether it was that Hathaway hit or a variety of different situations that he put himself into, he was never quite the same player after those moments. He didn't play with the same physicality that we saw in the 2022-2023 season. Even before that, in the Stadium Series Toronto game, everything that we loved about Dylan Cousins, the workhorse from Whitehorse, he was also not necessarily ever this amazing two-way center that we all wanted him to be.
We thought he would be,
that we thought he would be or wanted him to be. He was relatively good in his own end, but what made him an exciting prospect and why he got that big deal was his shot, was his production, was his ability to make plays in the top 6, right? Like when we initially saw the kid line, we were also excited because it seemed like something that could exist for 10 plus years in Buffalo. Didn't work out, and that's okay because guys are young and they go through different situations. With Josh Norris, he has a similar profile, obviously similar contract, making about $7.5 million per year, same exact term left on his deal. He's a bit more of a goal scorer, which I think obviously can't hurt. The Sabres are scoring a lot of goals at 5-on-5, but not necessarily in the power play. Norris has been really good in the power play. He is a good face-off guy, which the Sabres really haven't had in a very long time. Cousins never proved that he could be consistent at the dot. And Norris is also good on the penalty kill. He's a good two-way center, and he's proven that in a variety of different ways over his career. Most metrics have shown that specifically. So while you can talk about which player has a better projection, I mean, Cousins is a little bit younger. The only concern with Norris is that he's had 3 different shoulder surgeries.
That is
And
the concern, right? Like,
that
you
is a
can't.
concern. And I don't think the Sabres would, especially after the Jack Eichel thing, I don't think they make that trade without him going through rigorous physical testing first. And their doctors looking at his medicals, looking at everything related to the surgeries, and knowing every single piece about that before risking
You would
as
hope,
big of an asset as Dylan Cousin is before making that trade, right?
Yeah, you would hope.
You would never know. You never know what's going to happen. Obviously, it's a physical game, and maybe he's adjusted his play style after having 3 shoulder surgeries. But at least from what I've seen, from when he's healthy, he's a guy that could put up 60 points a year. He has already scored 30 goals in the league. He's relatively young, and he's got some motivation to prove himself, just like Dylan Cousins does. Cousins has had a good couple games in Ottawa. He had a game-winning goal the other night. Motivation is a big thing in the NHL and professional sports, in any sport. And I think the change of scenery, the reclamation project from each franchise could be good for both teams. I really do.
Yeah. Your thoughts on, again, Cousins' performances too. I want to talk about Norris here for a second, but I also want to talk about the comments after both of his first 2 games. Some kind of thought it was a shot at Buffalo. I would say the first comments he made weren't necessarily a shot. He was just kind of saying how he felt. But I wasn't too pleased with how he framed, I guess, the energy, after they won that game and his goal, like pretending kind of like he never felt that here in Buffalo, which is a complete fabrication. And I even tweeted it earlier. It's like, I wonder how he felt when he played 1 good year in Buffalo and the Sabres rewarded him for an over $7 million contract. And he disappeared for the next 140 games.
So, like,
that deal.
If you're Dylan Cousins, like, how do you feel being traded?
Yeah, no, it sucks. Your life's been uprooted, right?
Yeah.
But it's also a business, and I guess you don't really understand the full scope of how much of a business this game really is at that level until you get traded, right? Or you see your friends get traded. Maybe he kind of experienced that a little bit last year with Middlestat. And then finally this year with him. But I don't know, man. I thought we showed him tons of appreciation.
And I don't necessarily think he's taking a shot at Buffalo fans. I think it's more so just like we were talking about with the reclamation project. I think he's just excited for a fresh start. And if you're him, like, why wouldn't you be getting out of whatever's happening here? Right? Yeah. Like, I don't necessarily think that's him taking the Eichel route, like specifically calling out Buffalo fans. I think that as a Canadian kid going to the capital of Canada, where they do obviously have very good fans, just like Buffalo fans are, of course, like the support hasn't been the same over the past few years because they've missed the playoffs for 14 straight years. It must be exciting for him, especially to play potentially on the top power play unit, to play with a guy like Brady Tkachuk, who if I was Dylan Cousins and I heard Brady Tkachuk's interview after his good buddy Josh Norris got traded, I wouldn't have felt great. No. Even Brady Tkachuk said that, like, hey, this sucks, and I don't want them to take this the wrong way, but I'm legitimately sad that my best friend Josh Norris just got traded to a division rival. That is not a good feeling for anybody. So I think this situation in any trade in professional sports, look at Luka Doncic, all-world superstar, got traded in the middle of the night without knowing to the Los Angeles Lakers.
After he bought a new house.
Exactly.
And like a big house.
It took a couple days for him to like fully realize it because he was so shocked. But then they went on this run, and it's still going to be a little bit tough for him to eventually like get a full feel for it. Even living in LA, as I know as well as anybody, he said the other day, he was just like, traffic's crazy, man. Especially compared to Dallas. But you're, like you said, you're uprooting your life. Dylan Cousins has a girlfriend, I'm sure probably wants a family someday, and moving from Buffalo to Ottawa in the middle of the season, probably living out of a hotel for a month or two, is not the easiest thing in the world. So anything he says after a game, especially an emotional game where he's a game-winning goal, I'm not necessarily going to blame him for. And also, I don't care what Dylan Cousins says.
Yeah, he's not our problem. He's not our
problem. And exactly. And I wish no ill will on him. I'm looking forward to the Sabres having 8 or so matchups a year against him over the next however many years. But Josh Norris, as long as he's a good teammate and he shows a good effort and he has a tangible impact on the Sabres' fortunes for however many years, he's got 5 years left on his contract, that's all I care about. And I, for one, am very happy they brought in a guy who is willing to play potentially on the top line, depending on what we do this offseason. But yeah, that's all I care about. Like, Dylan Cousins can say whatever he wants. I'm not going to pay it any mind whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's not like we've literally had, it's like Groundhog Day after a trade, right? Like, we've had this conversation how many times now with multiple players, with Casey Middlestat and whoever, fill in the blank with their new team. I think the only player we really haven't really speculated about saying something that can be perceived as negative, honestly, after leaving was probably Reinhart. I don't ever.
Yeah, or Montour, or any of the main guys. Like, I think Montour said, I mean, Reinhart
wanted to be here.
Yeah, he did want to be here. And yeah, so believe me, like we've done this so many times. I don't care what these guys are doing unless it's against us. So yeah, that's water under the bridge to me. Best of luck to him. I think Ottawa's in a really interesting position right now. I think a lot of NHL fans would be really excited if, not necessarily Sabres fans, but would be really excited if the two wildcard teams were the Senators and the Blue Jackets, as opposed to the Rangers, the Islanders, the Bruins, all of these retread older teams that don't have a lot of juice to them. Like, do you not want to see Brady Tkachuk in the playoffs? Like, I think that would be pretty electric. And also, even for a goalie lover as myself, like, look at what Linus Ullmark did last night. He made 48 of 49 saves, 4.89 goals saved above expected. Like, Linus Ullmark at the top of his game was a Vezina Trophy winner 2 years ago. And now he's playing, obviously, for a division rival. But I like to watch good hockey. And if Dylan Cousins, in any capacity, is able to contribute to that with a team in a new scenario, more credit to him. That's what he was brought in there to do. And I don't think he's not I don't think he's not capable of it. He just wasn't here, and that was really apparent. So that's why they had to make this trade.
No, again, it's and me, man. We've said it I've said it a bunch of times. Like, I've always tried to be an advocate for Dylan Cousins. I was at my high point with him at that Heritage Classic game. I think
that was his second year in the league.
Yeah, like
first year
after Matthews, and then fighting bunting, getting kicked out of the game, and we all have that image of him standing outside the glass with Terry Pegula, losing his mind watching us beat Toronto, and then obviously, I forget who Marner was with, but at the Bills game, it was Marner and who?
It was Morgan Riley.
Morgan Riley, yeah. And he took a picture on the field, and Dylan Cousins reacted with his, head slap emoji, whatever it was. You really felt that Cousins was bought in, and maybe he was always bought in, but just something changed about him, man, and the style of play and his level.
There's the culture too, right? Like, do you not think that it broke him down? It's breaking a lot of these guys down.
Yeah, for sure. How could it not?
Exactly. So I don't blame him at all. I was high on him, obviously. Ryan Miller night, overtime game-winning goal off the beautiful pass from Dahlin, and the emotion. A lot of people tweeted that video after he's talking about emotion after his game-winning goal the other night and how great of a night that was. Obviously, there have been great moments with him in the course of these past 5-6 years, and I don't discount anything he did. He was a top draft pick. They drafted him when they did. They could have taken guys like Trevor Zegras. They could have taken a variety of different guys, and instead they went with Dylan Cousins. And I have no regrets over it, but at the same time, I think a lot of the times people in the analytics community and people that don't trust it as much and trust their eyes are oftentimes not aligned on players. Everybody was aligned on Dylan Cousins.
Yeah, we were all like,
everybody was. The numbers were showing that he was very bad. His game on the ice was showing that he was really bad, and he wasn't the same player that he was 2 years ago. So, yeah, that's when you know that it's time for a change. And credit to Kevin Adams for making another legitimate hockey trade.
Great.
Yeah, and Josh Norris, like, his upside is just as good or potentially even better.
I think he's a better two-way player. I mean, Kevin spoke pretty highly on that, and then the metrics kind of show that. Obviously, we both know we're not big analytics guys, but I mean, it's kind of easy to just the eye test. You can tell he hustles in the defensive zone. He's great on faceoffs. We've seen that. I mean, numbers don't lie. But again, his knack around the net, his speed. You saw that assist to Tage last night. That was hustle. That was pure outworking the defenseman who had a few steps on him and just outworking, just that kicking it over to Tage and letting him finish the job. That was a beautiful goal. That was a beautiful play.
They've built a lot of their team recently on speed specifically, and while that may not be the best reflection, given that they have been as bad as they are this year, speed does hurt in the right situation. It hurts another team in the right situation, and combined with his shot and his work ethic, provided he can stay healthy, seems like a guy that'll fit in your top 6 for the next 5 years. So I'm super down for it. I've watched a lot of his highlights. He's got a really good release, really good shot.
Oh, fantastic.
And obviously, he's got a lot of pedigree, especially coming up through the U.S. NDDP, I can't say, U.S. National Development Program. Yeah, coming up through that program, obviously playing with guys like Brady Tkachuk. Like, I'm sure Donnie had his influence on him at one point. Like, that is a guy who has been a high-caliber player for a long time and has played at a really high level when he's been healthy. So I'm excited. Not often in a season that's lost for over a month now do you get to get excited about watching players in the final month. But if he's going to be a guy that is hopefully part of the answer moving forward, I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, me either. It's, again, I think he's been exciting, especially, I mean, again, we didn't get much in that first game. He had a couple good looks, but that second game is really where, and again, being put in a position like Dylan Cousins was given multiple times, especially in this past season, to play with Tage. And we saw it immediately right away. They clicked right away. Tage mentioned how fun it was to play with him, how, he's really looking forward to see if that chemistry continues to build. And just having another center of that skill set, I think that depending on where you, obviously right now, he slotted in with Tage, so that's your number one center, right? But we'll see with the months to come, where he slots in. I think ideally he would be your number 2 center, right? Like, that's the plan for him, I'd have to imagine. Where we plan on utilizing Kulik. I know they've used him a lot at center. Again, we'll see how the lines shake out, again, tomorrow night. But Kulik was back in the lineup, correct? Yeah, he was.
Mm-hmm.
And where was he on? Was he the second line center?
I don't remember off the top of my head personally. But
maybe if somebody in the chat can let us know what the lines were. Again, I can't remember off the top of my head either. But I know the first line being Paterka. I think it was Paterka, Norris, and Tage. But yeah, it's exciting. Seeing new players were exciting. You can go back as far as back in the glory days, even when they traded Brian Campbell for Steve Bernier. And the pick.
Yeah.
I think he scored 2 goals or even a hat trick. His first game as a Sabre, and it was exciting.
And not for nothing, like, speaking of the U.S. National Development Program, like, he's an American guy. And as we saw in the Four Nations, like, these guys do have a certain sense of pride and a sense of patriotism for their countries and playing for their countries. And obviously, Buffalo's a stone's throw from Canada. But going from a team like the Senators, which is, aside from the Leafs and the Canadiens, about as Canadian as it gets, to a team like the Sabres, who obviously haven't had a lot of success in a long time, but everybody with a YouTube account knows what the hockey culture can be when this team is winning and how good of a hockey town it is, even when the Sabres aren't winning, given the TV ratings for NHL playoffs and Four Nations games. So while it wasn't his choice to come here, I can't imagine he's that upset I think he's from Michigan or right across the border from Canada and Michigan. But yeah, you can't imagine he's that upset playing with a guy like Tage, getting an opportunity potentially on the power play, playing with Dahlin, which I'm sure we'll talk about here soon. I hope at least. I can't imagine that. Aside from not playing with his best buddy Brady Tkachuk, I think he understands it is a business, and we'll see what happens here.
I agree. One thing I do want to talk about too, before we get to obviously the big news of the day. I know people keep calling, especially me, because I've tweeted about it a couple of times, that I'm crazy. Lazzy said the only way it would happen, and he said it to me in a text. And he actually chirped me a little bit today on with Jeff Merrick on the Sheet podcast, the Sheet with Jeff Merrick. He tripped me a little bit, but like, is Mitch Marner really so unrealistic given the fact that hasn't been willing to negotiate with Toronto on an extension? It kind of is starting to get that vibe that Tavares gave the Islanders when he was eventually, gone. He left in free agency and went and signed with Toronto. Kind of getting that vibe a little bit. If they get bounced in the first round, somebody in that core four is going, right? They have to.
Tavares. I don't know. I don't know the clearest picture of Toronto's cap situation. Obviously, they've paid Matthews. They paid Nylander. I don't know what Morgan Riley's contract situation is. If there was another guy they would pay, feasibly, it would be the guy that sets up Austin Matthews, right?
Yeah.
So while I don't necessarily think Marner not being able to agree with the Leafs is unrealistic, I think it's more likely than not they do whatever they can to bring him back.
But you're paying Nylander, who's been phenomenal for them.
Of course, you can't pay everybody.
You're not getting rid of Tavares. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to agree to waive his no trade clause. He's not.
No,
you're going to pay. You have to think down the line. Matthews only signed a 5-year deal, so you're going to have to pay him again. I got originally, and that's a guy. Depending on obviously he's having kind of not, I won't say a down year, but like he's not having the year you'd expect of Austin Matthews. That's a guy that when his contract comes up, and that depending on how much more the cap, that's a guy that you could realistically say could be your first ever $20 million a year hockey player.
So my thing is that given Marner is from Toronto, right? From Toronto.
Great, why wouldn't he sign right now?
But I think he wants to. I think he does want to see what his market value is.
Yeah,
as any player would. But the only team that he's going to take less to play for is the Leafs.
Agreed.
So therefore, it is more likely than not, in my opinion, that he's going to come to some agreement, whether before the end of the season or after the season's over, to stay with his hometown team. And if they don't win this year, do what he can to try to win a cup with Austin Matthews and William Nylander. Like, that makes the most sense. But if, let's say, they're only able to offer him 12 or 13 million, obviously the cap's going up. I'm not sure exactly at the moment what Austin Matthews makes. Is it 14? I don't know.
Making Draisaitl. I know Draisaitl is the highest paid player, I believe, in the NHL. I want to say Matthews makes like 12 or maybe 12 and a half.
So it'd be hard to justify paying Marner more than Matthews.
There's no way you can.
But I think Matthews would also understand that, given that the cap is going up and he's signing his deal later than he did, I think Matthews would rather Mitch Marner be on the team as well. So I don't think Matthews would be too upset if they signed Mitch Marner to an 8-year, $13 million AAV deal. What Buffalo would need to do would be to pay Mitch Marner $1 million less than what Connor McDavid gets. Connor McDavid is going to renegotiate his deal this offseason. Yep. He's got 1 year left. He's going to be a UFA after this next upcoming year in 2026. So whatever McDavid gets, that sets the market for any forward in the league. I imagine McDavid's going to get something along the lines of 8 years, $125 million, which is about 15 and a half, 16 a year, which is ridiculous to say, given Connor McDavid is that much better in his sport than any NBA player getting $15 million a year in their sport. But different sports, different revenues, whatever. Yeah, I think Buffalo would need to offer Marner $15 million a year.
I think that, but here's the thing too, and this is why I keep bringing it up. You are paying Tage Thompson what? Is it 7.5 for a guy who's gonna give you
that might have to be a Josh Allen renegotiate situation.
I mean, maybe, but I mean, look how long McKinnon had to wait to get his new contract, and he's only Tage is 2 years into his deal.
For sure, but that's also a situation of like, yeah, that was projection based, but it turns out he actually lived up to it and then some, right? Like,
Agreed,
if you
but
want to keep your superstar happy, I don't know.
But again, I agree. But given that's what he's making right now, okay, that's what you're making right. He is signed to make that much money, whether he likes it or not. Maybe you restructure that deal in year 5 of it. Give him what he deserves. I would not be restructuring that deal right now or even next year. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't, because he signed the deal after a 30-plus goal season. He signed that deal, even though he had to, and that's the fault of his own agent. I can't believe his agent allowed him to sign that.
No, for sure. But I also, you don't want this to be a tense situation either, right? It's already bad enough in Buffalo.
There were reports of him complaining.
No, not at all. But what I'm saying is that
he's complaining. No.
No. There's not, but at the same time, there's frustration. And
what frustration with losing? Have you heard a single thing about Tage Thompson being frustrated with his contract?
No, but not of his contract. I'm just saying specifically related to what we saw on Sunday. There's no frustration from Josh Allen, but it's a matter of the organization working with an agent to maybe be team friendly in some aspects, but also rewarding him for what he's done, given that he massively outplayed his original contract. You're
comparing football and the NHL.
No, I know, but that's a precedent that's been set before in a variety of different sports.
Yeah. Okay. You don't really see NHL contracts get renegotiated like that when we're not even halfway into them. It just doesn't happen very often.
I don't know. It's a hypothetical, but it is something I've thought about.
Do I think that it could happen? For sure. But right now, you should be trying to take advantage of the fact that you are paying potentially a perennial 40 goal scorer pennies in the dollar for what he's worth. At least right now. Maybe not pennies, but you know what I mean. You throw in $15 million for a Mitch Marner in free agency if he gets there. Maybe you price Toronto out of the ability to even get him. That's why I think it's ridiculous that he's going to get the free agency, because he will. If he gets the NHL free agency, he is going to have teams offering him $15 million a year, no doubt about it. And Buffalo should be having that conversation. They should.
I think that's a conversation that we're having, right? I think what Laz is saying is that it's more likely than.
According to Sylvian, NHL contracts can't be restructured by the CBA.
Oh, interesting. Well, there you go.
It might not even matter. So, but let me just finish my point. Is the fact that you want to take advantage of the fact that you are paying him $7 million a year. So $15 million, say, for 5 to 8 years for Mitch Marner. Maybe he only wants a 5-year contract, because maybe in 5 years he wants to get paid again. Who knows? But you take advantage of that. You just do. Then you're only paying $20 to $21 million for two guys who, again, we tweeted out the stats of how much Marner has helped contribute to Austin Matthews' success. I think it's 450 something assists from Marner to Matthews, and 142 of those 400 something are his primary assists. Just imagine what he'll do for a guy like Tage Thompson, who's already scoring 40 goals a season without a playmaker on his line.
I don't think anyone's doubting how good Mitch Marner would be for the Sabres.
And I'm not saying he's doubting, but just imagine you're getting those two guys at $20 to $21-ish million a season. That's what you would expect to pay for probably those two guys. You would be probably expecting to pay almost more than that, or maybe you would be paying that. So realistically, the Sabres are very capable of making that happen and overpaying anybody in the NHL to get a guy. And especially, I know it sounds stupid, but we just talked about the fact that he is a massive Bills fan. It's close to home. He lives in he's from Markham, Ontario, or wherever Markham is in Canada.
It's north of Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. It's close enough, right?
Yeah.
And he has, from what I've been told and what I've seen, he has friendships with some of the players with the Bills. I would not be surprised that if the Buffalo Sabres were serious about getting him, that they do. Hey, maybe we sweeten it. We've seen Dion Dawkins try and go on recruiting trips for guys like Myles Garrett. I know for a fact that Dion and Mitch Marner know each other. I've seen a personalized autographed jersey from Mitch Marner to Dion Dawkins. Maybe they go on a recruiting trip to Toronto in order to try and get
Have Josh take his private jet up there.
Why not? like what I go back to the point. I remember when we signed Mario Williams. Obviously, this is well before Terry Pegula, but they wouldn't let Mario leave the city. Now, I think Mitch Marner is one of those elite guys that already knows the fact he's been to Buffalo enough. He knows that Buffalo isn't a shithole city like the stereotypes say. Oh, it's a shithole. Weather's terrible. The dump. However, I think he's smart to know that's not the vibe, the real vibes of Buffalo. So if you were gonna try and sign a superstar, maybe Mitch Marner is the guy to go, because maybe he already knows that those stereotypes aren't necessarily true about Buffalo, because he does come here quite a bit for non-hockey related reasons.
Listen, I would love for the Sabres to do exactly what you're saying. I have no confidence they're actually going to do it.
I agree. I'm just trying to dream here, Rolf. I'm trying to dream.
For a team that has been economic, efficient, hasn't spent to the cap for the past 5 years, for them to actually dole out an 8-year, $15 million a year contract to, I mean, believe me, if you're going to do it for anyone, it would be a guy like Mitch Marner, right? But I am not going to get my hopes up too much because, like I said, I have a feeling Toronto's going to get it done somehow. And it's unfortunate because, of course, like you would want that type of player to at least have a shot at him going to free agency. But he is from Toronto. He's had a massive amount of success playing specifically with Austin Matthews. And it probably serves his best interest as a player to not take the type of risk to go from the Leafs to the Sabres, who haven't made the playoffs in 14 years. It's going to take a lot. But if he is available, we'll see what happens.
If he gets the free agency,
and $20 million.
Yeah. I personally think Austin Matthews will probably be the first $20 million hockey player in the NHL when his contract is up. That's just my opinion. Moving on to like the news of the day. Obviously, this podcast, me, you, all of Sabres Twitter went through a cycle of emotions today when the Spittin Chiclets podcast.
Let the record show I was never worried.
Okay. All right. But I think the majority of Sabres Twitter, given the history with this team, with franchise level players, went through a very different cycle of emotions. And we're going to get to that. Paul Bissonnette, better known as Biz Nasty on Twitter, Spittin Chiclets Podcast, made comments about, we're going to play him here for you guys in a second, but made comments about the Rasmus Dahlin, the Sabres situation. The Sabres came up in conversation, and he made mention that he spoke to somebody, I'm assuming, or I'm not sure if he actually said close to the situation or with the organization, that there was a meeting between Rasmus Dahlin and Kevin Adams, and during said meeting, Dahlin said something to the effect that if the Sabres need to get this situation fixed, and if they don't, he is going to want out. I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that clip here just momentarily as soon as I find it. But yeah, just Hurls, your immediate thoughts on that. Because again, it's not unrealistic to see a guy who is as passionate and cares as much about winning as he does to feel that type of frustration when all you've done is lose since day one here in Buffalo.
So my initial reaction to seeing the first tweet that I saw about it was, I don't know if that's coming from the Sabres front office. That sounded like a telephone type situation where he was correct. The meeting happened. Dahlin even confirmed that himself, that the meeting did happen. But to make a trade demand as the captain, obviously we have experience with Jack Eichel, but these are two different people, two different situations, two different players. I'm not going to conflate the two. Mm-hmm. To make a demand like that in this type of situation with as big of a role as Dahlin does, and the type of person that he is and everything he's shown to be, I just didn't, at its face value, based upon the tweet that I saw and eventually the clip, my initial reaction was this probably got blown out of proportion. And this is not exactly what was said. Given everything surrounding the Sabres right now and the organizational rot and also the perception of the Sabres around the league, especially from that podcast specifically, I didn't believe it. And I hoped specifically what happened 30 minutes later, what happened, and then it did. So we can get more into that, but if you want to play the clip, you can.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up right now. My Twitter on my laptop is being kind of funky right now. So, but continue on that.
So it's just more so just real quick, like, yeah, like I think Biz probably was told that. I think somebody connected to the Sabres, whether that's an agent from someone on the team, maybe Dahlin's agent, or somebody connected to the front office, but anybody in Kevin Adams' circle or front office like circle, they have no interest in letting that leak to that podcast. That does not do the Sabres any good whatsoever. So for that to come out of 1C More Knox Plaza seemed a bit implausible for me. As we've talked about this season, the only things the Sabres really truly have going for them at the moment are two players, Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson. Those are the only two things the team has going for it.
Correct.
Dahlin has proven this season specifically that he's a top 5 defenseman in the National Hockey League. He proved it in the Four Nations tournament when he was playing with better players. He's proved it all season long. He proved it when they went on a 13-game winless streak when he was out for a majority of that time. Every single night he goes out there and shows how generationally good he is. So for that to somehow leak out of the Sabres front office, whoever was in that meeting, whoever heard about that meeting, it just didn't seem plausible to me. And turns out, and we can get to Dahlin's comments. Thankfully, it wasn't.
I'm not sure why they're not, but regardless, yeah. Like here's the thing with me when it comes to this entire situation is normally I kind of look back at the Mike Babcock situation, right? When they were the first ones to kind of report on Mike Babcock and what was going on with him and the Blue Jackets and what eventually led to him being released or resigned or being forced to resign. I just don't feel that. I'm not going to call Biz an insider because he doesn't even call himself an insider, but a guy with that much connection with a lot of the active and past players in the league. I think he's had Dahlin on Spittin Chiclets before. I'm pretty sure he has. To just say a blanket statement like that, unless he's heard it from somebody that he feels he can trust. So here's my thoughts on the situation, and I'm just gonna. Again, I'm happy that Dahlin came out and said what he said. I'm happy that it turned out, at least from the way we see it for the time being, that it hopefully is not true. But having said that, could this be maybe even somewhere in the middle, where maybe like the conversation was had between him and Kevin? Maybe, yeah, Rasmus Dahlin didn't say he wanted to leave, but he made it known that like these things need to change. And
I think it's way closer to what we've been saying. Spend to the cap. Make yourself a legitimate organization. Make the game day experience better for fans. Make improvements to the arena. Like, be an NHL franchise.
Yes.
Right? That is probably closer to what it was. Then, hey, I'm going to make a thinly veiled threat about being out when I just signed an 8-year contract. Like, how is that? I don't know. It didn't seem like him to me. And yeah, somebody that Biz trusts told him that, and I don't blame him at all for going on his podcast and saying it. Like, he's allowed to do that, right? Yeah. Like, especially around trade deadline season, like, we have reports like that all the time. Think about what happened with the Elias Pettersson and JT Miller situation. I don't think anybody knows for sure what happened there.
What would happen, yeah.
So there's a lot of hearsay and there's a lot of telephone when it comes to these insider GM agent type situations. So whoever told him that probably had an agenda, right? And they probably heard it from somebody. And whether it's true or whether it's not, I like that Rasmus Dahlin cares enough about this organization and this team and winning that he would even say something close to that.
Yeah.
It shows he cares.
That's what a captain should do.
Yeah.
That is what a captain should do.
And when I heard him speak in a minute and 40-second clip that Matt Beauvais posted on Twitter. For anybody that hasn't seen it, it's really good, and I think everybody should watch it because his real-time, genuine reaction to hearing about that clip would seem to be like for the first time, or maybe it wasn't for the first time. He was shocked, and it seemed like he was as much of it as much as like
shocked, for sure.
His personality could be pissed off. He was pissed off. Mm-hmm. And I think that whatever he said to somebody about that meeting got misconstrued and relayed to Paul Bissonnette in that type of way. So yeah, I'm not worried about it at all personally.
And again, going back to Dahlin's response, yeah, again, the look of surprise, him adamantly denying it, and then going further to say that the statement itself, the thought of itself, pisses him off. Because I think he is a guy who takes a lot of pride. It takes a lot of pride in his role as captain. He's a guy who takes a lot of pride. And I remember even going back to like his first 2 years with Buffalo, there was like an interview. I forget who did the interview, but he's talking about like playing anywhere else. If you were ever going anywhere else, he said anywhere but Toronto. Like he never wanted to play for Toronto because he knows the hatred for Toronto in Buffalo. And like that kind of like that really spoke, volumes to me as a guy who grew up, a guy who grew up in that rivalry, who hated that franchise as much as I did. It spoke volumes to me. So that being said, I look at his response. I also say this. What else was he supposed to say? He's not going to come out and say, yeah, I said it, right? Like, that'd be stupid of him. Like, he's not going to come out and say that. That's why I tend to think that where I kind of go closer to the middle, maybe not exactly in the middle, leaning more towards it wasn't said. I just think that maybe what was said was, you need to get this shit together because I'm not going to play my entire contract out if this doesn't get rectified. Maybe he didn't directly say, I want out, but maybe he made it known that, I'm your highest paid player. I'm the captain. I want to win. Figure this shit out. Or maybe I don't see myself as a Sabre by the time this contract is over with. I don't know. It could go either way. To me, that's how I feel. I'm a little indifferent. I play devil's advocate. I might think it might be closer to the middle than maybe people seem to think. I just don't think Biz would just say something like that.
No, but like he heard it from somebody. He didn't make it up.
Yeah,
so like there's no fault of his own. He's allowed to say that on his National Hockey Podcast. Like that's big news.
He was right about the Mike Babcock thing. And
and like that is legitimately big news, and he has the right to report it. I'm just saying specifically that in a lot of these situations, specifically when it comes to trade demands or anything else, like what happened in that meeting, nobody will know what happened in that meeting because the cameras probably weren't rolling. There weren't microphones. We can only trust Kevin Adams and Rasmus Dahlin at their word, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I think the initial reaction from a lot of Sabres fans was like, good. He needs to have this type of attitude. That's not him giving up. That's him for 7 years only sniffing the playoffs once as one of the best players in the league, especially for the past 3 to 4 years. I'd be frustrated too. And as the captain, he wants to turn this around. My initial reaction to it, as you've been saying for week 2, like sign a player like this. If you have the opportunity, sign a player like Marner. Sign Nikolai Ehlers, who's a free agent this upcoming summer, who Sabres fans have wanted for what seems like 10 years now. Yeah. Go out and get legitimate NHL, either not close to veteran, but veteran NHL hockey players who have proven themselves in the league. I think that's what Dahlin wants. And also, I think for a lot of us, and this relates to the Mitch Marner conversation, spend to the cap. It's the least you can do. Yeah. And you don't have to treat this franchise like the little brother that they have been compared to the Bills and saving money on your new stadium and everything related to that. If you give a legitimate shot at this and bring in guys who want to be here, and if you have to overpay for it, you've already started with guys like Jordan Greenway and Jason Zucker. That changes the culture, and that makes guys like superstars and Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson a little bit happier. So I'm just really happy that Dahlin did what he did today. I'm as big of a defender of him as anybody, and that's because I know how good he is, and he seems like a legitimate leader and a pretty good guy as well, aside from being one of the best players in the league. So to keep him happy is absolutely paramount, just like the Bills keeping Josh Allen happy. I actually put them on the same level relative to each franchise, and that's all they can do at this point. So I'm happy they shot it down pretty quickly, and we move on from here.
Yeah. That being said, too, we go back to the Marner situation. We kind of go back to Eichel, because obviously remember when the rumors came out that Eichel requested a trade. I think it was originally reported by Elliot Friedman that Eichel wanted out, this, that, and the other. And then I think Paul Hamilton was the one who shot it down. No, that never ended up being true, because after he was traded, he admitted that it in fact was true. I don't know what you got going on with your laptop.
I'm working on it. Sorry, I'm on a phone.
Okay. No, you're good. You're good. But that being said, it was denied by Paul Hamilton. No, that was never a thing. And I'm assuming that maybe the organization were the ones that told Paul Hamilton to say that, because they're trying to put out a fire before it could start. Turns out after he's traded, he has this little stupid interview with Elliot Friedman in his backyard where he might say, yeah, it was true. I wanted out. Well, if you remember, like that year, what was the first thing they did in free agency? They paid Taylor Hall $8 million for 1 year to make Jack happy. It's the only reason they went out and got Taylor Hall. Regardless of the type of player he was, that was a move that was made to make your captain happy because he just requested a trade. And after everything you just went through to get him, the tank, everything that this organization went through, the fan base went through, you got to keep that guy happy. I look at this situation, whether it's 100% true, it's 100% false, or it's somewhere in the middle. I look at this as a situation where maybe, to your point, Dahlin is trying to push those buttons and say, hey, this needs to get rectified. You need to go spend the cap, your point. That's why I kind of talk about Mitch Marner in this respect even more so now, because maybe this is the pressure that needs to be put on the organization to go make a move like that, Hurls.
100%. And that was my initial reaction too. Like, you have to do something eventually, right? Like, you got to spend to the cap. You got to bring in guys in that have proven they're good in the league and that they can actually produce, and guys that want to be here, of course. And those three things for a team that's missed the playoffs for 14 years is not necessarily the easiest combination. But if a guy like that is available, that would make Rasmus Dahlin happy. Right. So there is a rectifiable aspect to this, and it all goes back to if Terry Pegula is serious about spending money for this team.
Yeah.
And we'll know this summer, because if they do what they did last summer and they trot out the same group and they're relying on prospects, and it's guys that even if they're unable to sign free agents, let's say Marner's not available, let's say guys don't want to come, making trades, putting out offer sheets, doing something to make this team a competitive hockey group. So I don't know. Obviously, this came at an interesting time today, and with a month left in a pretty lost season.
19 games left. 19 games left this season.
It's unfortunate, but I think the one thing Sabres fans can hang their hats on is that at this point, you have a captain that wants to be here, wants to be a part of the solution. You re-signed a guy in Jason Zucker who wants to be a part of the solution. He said it himself. He said it's unfinished business for him. And you've got guys like Tage Thompson who's going to score 40, 45 goals this season. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. And you kept guys like Alex Tuch and JJ Peterka at the deadline. You've got Zach Benson.
I never thought Tuch was going anywhere.
No, me neither. But you've got Yuri Kulik. You've got, as of now, Bowen Byram, and I know Owen Power's a lightning rod, but he's still very young, and I'm still high on him. So I don't know. I'm not as down on the future of the team as I think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people have given up. But when you have a guy like Dahlin on your team, you have a chance. And when you have a guy like Tage Thompson, you have a chance. Just got to put it all together and bring some more guys in. And obviously, if Marner's available, that would be the big fish.
This is probably the most excited I've ever been for free agency.
Yeah, I mean, really me too. Been. Like, it's not just Marner though. Like, Ehlers is a guy. There's a lot of people available. A lot of
players out there. But in order to make Dahlin happy, say that's what this is. He's putting pressure, pushing the right buttons to try and get the team to make a move. I really do think that could be it.
How about make the fans happy?
Yeah, that too. Well, yes, of course, make the fans happy. But that's why I genuinely think, I go back to the Jack situation. He never denied requesting a trade when asked. Never denied it. And Paul Hamilton and the media, they came out immediately and said, no, there's no truth to that, no way. And then Jack Eichel after the trade confirms, yeah, I did request a trade. Flat out said, yeah, it was a trade. And then we realized everything after that, the Taylor Hall, that was all done in reaction to that. So, like, I look at this and I kind of hope, Hurls, I do kind of hope in the back of my mind that there is a glimmer of truth to this, because then it's time to start spending money. It's time to go, like, fish for big fish. I am done with signing guys that I don't want to see any one-year deals in free agency. I don't want to see another Jason Zucker on a one-year deal. As much as I've appreciated what Jason Zucker has done and will do in the next 2 years, I need somebody signed that is going to make a significant upgrade to this roster and a significant change to that locker room and the culture. That could be a guy like Mitch Marner, or you look at the top of the list, any one of those guys. Go, start taking chances. You're going to have to. So I kind of hope that there is a glimmer of truth to what Biz said, because then you cannot go from losing Jack Eichel, or going from losing to Ryan O'Reilly. If you're Terry Pegula, losing Ryan O'Reilly the way you did, especially the rumors surrounding it that some believe to be true, to Jack Eichel, to Sam Reinhart, and then you just can't. That can't happen. Can't happen. You got to do everything.
I mean, you've had enough organizational failure, and then losing likely the best player of all of them would be the worst thing. I think that would break me personally, and I think it would break a lot of fans. So
yeah,
we'll see. And I mean, my reaction to his interview today was, it was a genuine distaste with both the report and also with the state of the organization. And I think both things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
He knows how good he is. He knows how badly he wants to win. And he says it. I hate losing. Everybody hates losing, no matter what sport you're playing and what level you're playing at. Nobody wants to lose for their entire career. So whether it was vaguely true, something of the sort, or not true at all, you can tell how much he hates what's happening. And if Kevin Adams, if he's still going to be the GM, which looks like he will be, and if Terry Pegula still wants to be the owner of the Buffalo Sabres, which apparently he does, you do something to try to make him happy.
Yeah.
Point blank.
Yeah, I agree. So, I don't know. So, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think we about covered it. I enjoyed being online today. I thought that was fun, especially when it comes to something that truly matters for the Sabres and like the grand scheme of the NHL. I thought that discussion was interesting. And I think that anytime the Sabres are the center of the NHL world, even for 30 minutes, I think that's kind of cool. So I'm happy that got out there. Shout out Biz. Shout out whoever told him that. And honestly, shout out Dahlin. He's been my guy forever. I've got his jersey. I don't have any other jersey of any other player.
I got the 50th anniversary sweater too.
Yeah, so I don't. He's the only jersey I have of any guy on the team, and I got that because I was the most confident that's a jersey I wouldn't have to change. Mm-hmm. Very confident.
I did that with Eichel too. And
yeah. Well, the thing is, like, I thought about Eichel and then I wasn't sure, so I didn't do it. Yeah. But I was confident in Dahlin, and that's why I got his jersey. Mm-hmm. So I want him to be a Sabre for life, and I want to see him in that first home playoff game, whenever that is, hopefully the spring of 2026 in Buffalo, lining up out there before that first faceoff. And I want him to eventually be the guy who lifts the cup first for this organization. I know that sounds crazy to say right now, but if he's the guy that does it, how fitting and how amazing of a story would that be? So I hope it happens, obviously. And we go from here. 19 games left. Let's see how Josh Norris does. Hopefully Luukkonen plays as good as he has the past 2 games. Specifically last night.
Yep.
Specifically last night, and I didn't watch much Saturday, but I heard he was pretty good Saturday as well.
He was okay. He was okay.
I mean, a lot of shots though. I mean, he had the save percentage was really good. So for this team to succeed, he's got to be good, and I hope he finds his game in games that don't necessarily matter that much.
Yep. Not my final thought, but I will ask you this question for my final thought. Somebody just posted it, and a lot of action in the peanut gallery today too. So I appreciate it. I can't find the comment, but it was, having Zach Benson in the NHL at 18 was stupid. I pulled up the screen a second ago. I did read, I think it was in our chat. I don't know, I have to look into it, but if it's true that with him turning 20 years old, he wouldn't have to, by age, have to pass through waivers to be sent down to Rochester. Would you agree with Zach Benson starting in the AHL next year?
Depending on who we sign, yeah.
I am on board with that. 100%.
I mean, he's been really good for being a 19-year-old player, but is his game fully developed? No.
Not even just that. I just think that he's not a full-grown adult yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It do his, when you deep dive numbers, yeah, they look good. But, he's not like a guy that starts in the league year 1 at 18, like Connor McDavid or Connor Bedard or Macklin Celebrini, who you visibly, even Celebrini on a horrible team, is unbelievable, franchise-changing player. I just don't think, he came out of the gate hot with how well he played in preseason and in his first 8 games. He looked like he belonged. But at the end of the day, you can't rush the growth of your body.
I think more than anything, he is an above-average defensive player in the league already. Yeah. For him to live up to his draft pick, even, he needs to be a more impactful offensive player. And for him to gain that confidence and also that strength that you're talking about, doing it for 20 games in the AHL to start the season probably wouldn't be a bad thing. Yeah. So, depending on who we sign, who we trade for, who we offer sheet, if Zach Benson is pushed out of the lineup, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'll say to that. I love Zach Benson as a player. I am so excited about him as a prospect. He's one of the best draft picks we've made in the past 7-8 years. And I'm very confident he's going to be a 10-plus year NHL player moving forward.
Yeah.
But at his age, if he's able to play in the AHL, probably a good thing.
Yeah, and I think he's mature enough to know that, hey, have that conversation with him. It's not that we don't think you're a good player. I just think that to get you to avoid the Peyton Krebs thing, right? To fully develop him. Obviously, he wasn't ready. He shouldn't have been in the NHL after that trade. To avoid things like with Jack Quinn, you could even say Dylan Cousins might have needed another year in the AHL. You could. To avoid his development being ruined the way we've seen it in the past, you have that conversation. We want you to go out down to Rochester, want you to score 40 goals in a season, tear it up, be the best player in the AHL, and then you're our first call up when we need you.
Yeah, players and goalies are different, but it's the Devin Levi conversation too. They rushed his development, put him in bad situations on a bad defensive hockey team, both forwards and defensemen, and look at him in the AHL. He's absolutely crushing it along the development path that a lot of goalies take.
Yeah.
Getting him that experience and getting him those shots and getting him those reps, a la Devin Levi with Zach Benson, is not a bad thing. And I think guys realize that playing in likely the second best league in the world is not that much of a downgrade.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not. I rank the AHL above the KHL. That's the best. So many say that's the second. Some might say that's the second best league. But I still rank the AHL above the KHL.
I think everybody with legitimate hockey acumen knows that the AHL is better than the KHL.
Agreed. But that being said, guys, just remember this is brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a Fatty Beer and tell them 2 Goalies 1 Mike sent you. You can find them at Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter or fattybeer.com. And, of course, Buffalo Logo Apparel, whether it's your shirts, your hats, your hoodies, they have it all at Buffalo Logo Co. You shop local business, shop small business. They have all locally designed apparel, especially with the Bill stuff. check them out at Buffalo Go Co on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, I'll say this at the end of every episode, really appreciate all the people that, we probably have over 100 comments here in the Peanut Gallery for, a Tuesday night episode. Appreciate you guys always hopping on, giving us your 2 cents, venting with us. This little community we built, couldn't appreciate it more. I know Hurls appreciates it as well. If you've enjoyed this content, if you haven't followed us already on Twitter, if you are on Twitter, you can follow myself there. You can see at Duane S39. Follow Connor at CHurls13. Final podcast at 2 Goalies 1 Mike. You can find us on Facebook and the other platforms as well. Audio only. You can find us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just search 2 Goalies 1 Mike. And most importantly, if you are following along on YouTube, watch along on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit subscribe. Hit the bell icon. Slam that bell icon so you know when we go live. You can chime in, give us your thoughts live on YouTube. And please, 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 if you're watching right now, Dylan Baker, Scary Crazy Man, Hunter Rosen, Real Deal Prime, I'm shouting all you guys out. If you're watching along on Christopher Capellini. Actually, Christopher is a guy that saw me out while I was working one day. I said my name. We were talking Sabres. Like, are you the Duane and Connor from 2 Goalies 1 Mike? I was like, yep, that's me. And, he's subscribed now too. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us a lot. We are trying to monetize this thing. So please slam that like button. I am Duane for Connor from 2 Goalies 1 Mike. We'll be back probably tomorrow night for I'll Hang Up and Listen. But until then, as always, go Sabres.